welcome back to the best Christmas pageant ever. We're going to jump right in to the second part of chapter 3, right when the Herdmans start taking over the Christmas pageant. Well, they're not really taking over. They're just volunteering for the parts. So we'll see what happens. You ready? All right, Mother said. Ralph will be our Joseph. Now, does anyone else want to volunteer for Mary? Mother looked all around, trying to catch somebody's eye. Anybody's eye. Janet? Roberta? Alice? Don't you want to volunteer this year? No, Alice said, so low you could hardly hear her. I don't want to. Nobody volunteered to be wise men either, except Leroy Claude and Ollie Herdman. So there was my mother, stuck with a Christmas pageant full of Herdmans in the main roles. There was one Herdman left over, and one main role left over, and you didn't have to be very smart to figure out that Gladys was going to be the angel of the Lord. What do I have to do? Gladys wanted to know. The angel of the Lord was the one who brought the good news to the shepherds, Mother said. Right away, all the shepherds began to wiggle around in their seats, figuring that any good news Gladys brought with them would come with a smack in the teeth. Charlie's friend, Hobie Carmichael, raised his hand and said, I can't be a shepherd. We're going to Philadelphia. Why didn't you say so before? Mother asked. I forgot. Another kid said, my mother doesn't want me to be a shepherd. Why not? Mother said. I don't know. She just said don't be a shepherd. One kid was honest. Gladys Herdman hits too hard, he said. Why, Gladys isn't going to hit anybody, Mother said. What an idea. The angel just visits the shepherds in the fields and tells them Jesus is born. And hits them, said the kid. Of course he was right. You could just picture Gladys whamming shepherds left and right. But Mother said that was perfectly ridiculous. I don't want to hear another word about it, she said. No shepherds may quit or get sick, she added before the kid in the front pew could ask. While everybody was leaving, Mother grabbed Alice Wendelkin by the arm and said, Alice, why in the world didn't you raise your hand to be Mary? I don't know, Alice said, looking mad. But I knew. I heard Imogene Herdman telling Alice what would happen to her if she dared to volunteer. All the ordinary, everyday Herdman things like clonking you on the head and drawing pictures all over your homework papers and putting worms in your coat pocket. I don't care, Alice told her. I don't care what you do. I'm always Mary in the pageant. And next spring, Imogene went on, squinching up her eyes, when the pussy willows come out, I'll stick a pussy willow so far down in your ear that nobody can reach it. And it'll sprout there, and it'll grow, and you'll spend the rest of your life with a pussy willow bush growing out of your ear. You had to admire her. That was the worst thing any of them ever thought up to do. Of course, some people might not think that could happen, but it could. Ollie Herdman did it once. He got this terrible earache in school. And when the nurse looked down in his ear with her little lighted tube, she yelled so loud you could hear her all the way down the hall. He's got something growing down there, she hollered. They had to take Ollie to the hospital and put him under and dig his sprouted pussy willow out of his ear. So that was why Alice kept her mouth shut about being Mary. You know she wouldn't do all those things she said, I told Alice as we walked home. Yes, she would, Alice said. Herdmans will do anything. But your mother should have told them no. Somebody should put Imogene out of the pageant, and all the rest of them too. They'll do something terrible to ruin the whole thing. I thought she was probably right, and so did lots of other people. And for 2 or 3 days, all anybody could talk about was the Herdmans being Mary and Joseph and all. Mrs. Homer McCarthy called Mother to say that she had been thinking about it, and if the Herdmans wanted to participate in our Christmas celebration, why didn't they let them hand out programs at the door? We don't have programs for the Christmas pageant, Mother said. Well, maybe we ought to get some printed and put the Herdmans in charge of that. Alice's mother told the Ladies' Aid that it was sacrilegious to let Imogene Herdman be Mary. Somebody we never heard of called up Mother on the telephone and said her name was Hasselback, and she lived on Sproul Hill. And was it true that Emma Jean Herdman was going to be Mary, the mother of Jesus, in our church play? Yes, Mother said. Emma Jean is going to be Mary in our Christmas pageant. And the rest of them too? The lady asked. Yes, Ralph is going to be Joseph, and the others are the wise men and the angel of the Lord. You must be crazy, said Mrs. Hasselback to Mother. I live next door to that outfit with their yelling and screaming and their insane cat and their garage door going up and down all day long. And let me tell you, you're in for a rowdy time. Some people said it wasn't fair for a whole family who didn't even go to church to barge in and take over the pageant. My father said somebody better lock up the Women's Society Silver Service. My mother just said that she would rather be in the hospital with Mrs. Armstrong. But then the flower committee took a potted geranium to Mrs. Armstrong and told her what was going on, and she nearly fell out of bed, traction bars and all. I feel personally responsible, she said. Whatever happens, I accept the blame. If I'd been up and around and doing my duty, this never would have happened. And that made my mother so mad she couldn't see straight. If she'd been up and around, it couldn't have happened, Mother said. That woman, she must be surprised that the sun is coming up every morning without her to supervise the sunrise. Well, let me tell you. Don't tell me, my father said. I'm on your side. I just mean that Helen Armstrong is not the only woman alive who can run a Christmas pageant. Up till now, I'd made up my mind just to do the best I could under the circumstances. But now, she stabbed a meat fork in the pot roast, I'm going to make this the very best Christmas pageant anybody ever saw. And I'm going to do it with Herdman's too. After all, they raised their hands and nobody else did. And that's that. And it was too. For one thing, nobody else wanted to take over the pageant, with or without Herdman's. And for another thing, Reverend Hopkins got fed up with all the complaints and told everybody where to get off. Of course, he didn't say, go jump in a lake, Mrs. Wendelkin, or anything like that. He just reminded everyone that when Jesus said, suffer the little children to come unto me, Jesus meant all the little children, including Herdman's. So that shut everybody up, even Alice's mother. And the next Wednesday, we started rehearsals. That's the end of chapter 3. We're getting into some of my favorite parts, and I hope that you continue to listen. I think you're really going to love it. Like I told you before, it's one of my very favorites. I read it every year. I'll see you next time.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Glory